In this video, I want to talk about the hypothetical syllogism. And a syllogism is basically two premises, or two propositions stated a certain way that will inevitably lead to a third one. Alright, so if the syllogism is working properly from the two statements that you do get, you can draw a third one. And it's going to be self-evident. Okay. So the terms and the relationship of the third proposition that you end up concluding or drawing are inherent in the first two propositions. So let's take a look at what I have on the board here. A hypothetical syllogism will start with the major premise, which is always going to be an if-then statement. All right. So that's sometimes called a hypothetical statement or a conditional statement. And you see that this is the condition and this is the result. Now technically we can call it's called the antecedent, this part of the proposition. So the if part is called the antecedent, and you need to see the word here. It literally means to walk before, and because it comes before the consequent in terms of a relational cause and effect dynamic. All right, it's prior. Now, if you look at the word here, sequent, to follow with, so it follows with this. This is your consequent, and this is the effect, cause and effect, basically. That's what it's saying. Now, if the car, this one is saying if a car has decals, clings, or bumper stickers, it will be dirty inside. Now, I don't want you to start thinking here, is this statement true? I want you just to work with it in terms of its form. Okay, so this type of logic is also called formal logic because it really has its ground in the form of the propositions at hand, and how two premises, the formal qualities of two premises will lead to a formal construction of a conclusion. So let's not even ask right now whether this is right or wrong, as far as true or false. Does it correlate to reality? That's what I mean. Truth for me is a quality that propositions have, and it's the quality a proposition have if it correlates to reality. And anyway, we'll work with that definition. But here we go. If the car has decals, it will be dirty inside. So what if I come to you then and say, hey, I have some new information. The car is dirty inside. Can you draw a conclusion from that? Knowing that if the car has decals, it's dirty inside. And then I just got, then you're thinking, I know that. That's the proposition I have to work with. And then I just got some new information. The car is actually dirty inside. So what conclusion can you draw from that? How about this one? Okay, if the car has decals, it's dirty inside. I come along and say, hey, it doesn't have any decals. What conclusion can you draw? Well, what if I come along and said, okay, you know the thing, if the car has decals, it's dirty inside. Well, guess what? The thing has decals. Can you draw a conclusion? Well, what if I say, okay, so we understand if a car has decals, it's dirty inside. I found a car that's not dirty inside. So then what can we draw? What conclusion can we then say has to follow? It's better to say has to follow, or another way to say it is, what conclusion obtains? Okay. So let's take a look at this. I want you to think what your answers would have been. So let's do that again quickly. If the car has decals, it would be dirty inside. I come back to you and say, hey, it's dirty inside. What answer do you think you could come up with as a conclusion? How about if I say it's not dirty inside? What's your conclusion? Okay. If the car has decals, it will be dirty inside. What if I say it has decals? What's your conclusion? Here's some new information for you. It doesn't have any decals. What's your conclusion? Let's go ahead and look at the form. Okay, so let's get rid of the content because the content itself might be impeding our understanding of how this works. Let's do this. If A, then B. All right. In fact, let's just go ahead and memorize the two rules right now. Now, it's important to understand that in this video right here and in this statement, I have an if clause, not an if and only if. So let's call this an inclusive antecedent because it's not excluding other stuff. It just says if. let's call the if and only if form, like if I had written this if and only if the car has decals, let's call that the exclusive antecedent. And I'll deal with that in another video. But here we go with the antecedent. An inclusive antecedent, because it's not if and only if. So if A, then B. The rule is, let's see, I'll get fancy on us, and I'll do it in red. The rule is, if then, this is your major premise, capital M, capital P. If your minor premise, small m, small p, if your minor premise comes back and says, hey, guess what, A, you know what, then you can draw a conclusion. And the conclusion is, okay, then B. Now, what if I come back and say, hey, guess what? Now, the reason for that is you just gotta, the thing is saying, if you have A, then you're going to have B. So, A, well, then B. That's what it's saying. So, formally, you trust this promise to obtain, to hold. A, then the conclusion is, okay, B. That's what it's saying. Now, what if I do this? If A, then B. And I go, hey, so here's a bit of information. You know, that's. But what if I go, okay, if A, then B. Okay, you know what? Here's your minor premise. Not B. Sometimes it's written like that. Well, what's the conclusion here? So, you know, I'm gonna say, look, you know, if A, then B. And then you find out, hey, it's not B. Then you have to understand that it can't be A either. Because if A were there, you'd have B. It says if A, then B. If A were there, you'd have B. But you don't have B. So you can't have A, because if A were there, you would have B. But you don't have B, so you can't have A. Now, I could go along like that for 5 minutes until it clicks, but that's really the proof right there. Not B. Okay, then not A, because if I had A, the thing says I'd have B, but I don't have B, so I can't have A. So the conclusion here is not A. Or not A. So these are the only two ways you can get a valid conclusion from this statement. Okay? So in other words, if you had said this, if I had told you, look, if the car has decals, it will be dirty inside. And then I came running along and said, hey, guess what? It doesn't have decals. Okay, that would be the minor premise. It would be not A. I don't have that up here. And if you say, well, it doesn't have decals. If it had decals, it would be, it doesn't have decals. Ah, so it must not be messy. That is a wrong conclusion. You can't draw that conclusion. That's what we call an illicit conclusion, because it moves outside the bounds of the format. You just can't say that. This is inclusive. You know, we can't say that for the if-then statement. It might be a little different for the if and only if-then statement, but that's later. For this one, if I said if the car has decals, it will be dirty inside, and I say, hey, it has decals, or it doesn't have any decals, I give you not A, you can't draw any conclusion. Now, what if I said if the car has decals, it will be dirty inside, and I came along and said, hey, it's dirty inside. Now we got some more information. There's your minor premise, major premise. If it has decals, it's dirty inside. Minor premise, it's dirty inside. And then you came up with a conclusion, oh, so it has decals. You can't make that conclusion. That's an illicit conclusion. But these are, because I gave you B then. And there is no rule there for that. The rule is for not B. So there are only two ways you can draw a conclusion with this. All right. Now these have their names. This is called affirming the antecedent. If you affirm the antecedent with your minor premise, then you can affirm the consequent. This one, you're negating the consequent, then you can negate the antecedent. This is called modus ponens, because you're positing A, then you can posit B. Putting A, putting B. This is called modus tollens, because you're taking away B, then you can take away A also. Those are the only two ways you can come up with a conclusion here. We'll talk about why in the next video, and then we'll talk about exclusive hypothetical syllogisms.